Hi, I'm Gabe Zichermann. With tensions high around politics in the USA, rising anti-Semitism, global conflict, AI in the workplace, all the different things happening in our lives, friends of all kinds can find themselves in awkward situations for discussion. But friendships that are rooted in the workplace can have extra complexity. That's because most of us live in political and religious bubbles that have been increasingly homogenous over time. And there's lots of interesting research on this topic. Even though social media makes it feel like, we're super divided, within people's individual actual lives, they've generally become pretty homogenous. Our workplaces, therefore, have become one of the last true bastions of different opinions and heterogeneity in our lives. And I actually talk about this a bunch in my most recent TED Talk. It's especially true for big and hybrid employers because they're bringing together employees from all different walks of life and all different kinds of geographies. And that tends to bring together different ideas, maybe for the first time in employees' lives. Work friendships, therefore, require a different set of relating skills. And this is more true than ever when major external events are happening. When the company itself is in conflict, employees might band together, right? And show unity, for running into financial difficulty or a big lawsuit or something like that. But if the external issue is unrelated to work, but on people's minds, it's going to be very difficult for companies and the work friends inside of them to navigate that issue. And I've talked a little bit about how companies should approach it. But the question is, how should employees approach these difficult situations? Now, of course, you're going to want to talk to your close work friends about things happening in the news. As a lifelong startup founder, I've been in leadership roles at different startups during major events, including 9/11 and Trump's 2016 win. Every time we had to go back to work the next day or a couple of days later and continue our lives and the function of the company. But it was impossible to ignore the reality happening outside. Now, we might think of 9/11 as a pretty unifying event, and certainly the current political climate doesn't have the same unity of opinion. But every time there's a lot of surprise, there's a lot of dismay, and discussions always happen with some amount of diversity of opinion. Current events might be difficult with all kinds of friends, but in a workplace with that extra complexity, rifts get really costly. And sometimes employees might get the company involved when there's some kind of conflict, which, if you've got lots of safeguards in place to prevent actual bad behavior among employees, could get triggered when people feel uncomfortable or triggered, right? An interesting term. And people might weaponize those things in conflict. Moreover, you might not know your work friend's political orientation, even though you think you might. And you may not know how they've been personally affected by situations in the news, even though you think you might. So, as an employee, as a coworker, as somebody who wants, friends at work, you might find the situation extra complicated. And if you're close to a person and you're having feelings about the situation, you might want to still talk to them about it, right? So your instinct might be, I really still want to talk about this. And your company may have told you that you should bring your whole person to work. So you want to talk about things. Maybe they want to talk about things. How do you approach these difficult conversations in a company? What have I learned from helping people accomplish this? Option one, don't do it. Don't do it. It sounds ludicrous to suggest that you don't discuss tough political issues with work friends. I mean, after all, how close can your friendship be if you don't get into the meaty and important things unrelated to work? But there's a rub. If you don't already know your friends leaning on this issue, have you put the effort in to get to know them? Like, do you really know them? And if you know where they stand, are you bringing this up because you want to have a fight? Were you looking for affirmation? So why are you even bringing this up in the first place? But also just remember, not all issues need to be discussed with every friend. Not everyone is political, and not all friendships require 100% issue coverage. You can be very close with somebody and never bring up a topic that might be interesting to you, that may not be interesting to them, right? Think about things like religion. You may not talk about your religion with your friends, or even if you've got a particular sporting activity, you're really into football and they're really not. So you're not going to bring that up to them. You should, I guess, in theory, feel comfortable talking to any friend about whatever you want, but does that mean that you should still do it? You can read a lot more about EQ online, and I can post a link to some articles and studies if you're interested. But I think you already know the answer here. Not every friend should be the subject of every single conversation. Option number two, you can just ask. It's perfectly okay to ask someone whether or not they want to talk about something. It's weird because normally with super close friends and family, we're not usually accustomed to asking for consent in conversation. We typically don't say, hey, mom, is it okay now if I talk to you about X? But it can be really helpful when approaching tough topics with people. A good analogy is if you were trying to talk about something that's personal or uncomfortable for somebody. So imagine that your friend says, when my dad had cancer, and it's perfectly normal and actually demonstrates pretty good, empathy with them. If at that point you say, is it okay if I ask you more questions? Is it uncomfortable for you if I ask you more questions? And, maybe you don't want to probe more on that topic without consent. That would be pretty obvious to you. And I think you can use the same approach here when you're talking to friends at work about politics. Option number three is to focus on emotion versus substance. Now, this is the AP or advanced placement version of this idea, but leveraging your EQ, your emotional quotient, to engage with your friends on tough topics around feelings rather than facts can be a really good way to do this. For example, you can say, I want to talk about how something makes me feel rather than I want to talk about something. So I want to talk about how an attempted assassination on a political candidate makes me feel rather than I want to talk about the attempted assassination and whether or not it really happened. You can even be specific that you don't want to talk about opinions or argue realities. You can say, I don't want to talk about our opinions. I just want to talk about my feelings. I want to express them and I want some support. And you can ask for empathetic support or you can offer that upfront to someone. This can often be really difficult because people want you to rationalize your feelings and explain it to them. But if you can create boundaries around how you communicate, you can get what you need, emotional support, instead of what you probably should be avoiding, a debate about facts or outcomes. And this is especially true with employees and coworkers in the workplace, where sometimes you're just looking for support there and you're not necessarily looking to debate the political outcome. You're just looking to describe how you feel. Think of this like a conflict with your partner where you know you want to be right, right? Because everybody wants to be right in every conflict, but you probably shouldn't be right if what you're trying to do is maintain the health of your relationship. You just want to be heard. You don't need to be right, you just want to be heard. So it's hard to do, it's not easy to accomplish, but if you can bring that to your friendship sometimes, I think that can be really valuable. I've had several major conflicts with friends over the years around politics, especially, and these are often work friends and sometimes these are personal friends. I think returning to our first principles of ensuring that we've got connection, we've got emotional connection, and we're supporting each other, that can really help us debate, discuss, engage around difficult topics as long as we're focused on the emotional connection with each other. I'll also give you an extra kind of credit idea here, which is about intention and commitment. Before engaging with others on topics you feel are sensitive or risky, especially in the workplace, ask yourself the question, why is it that you want to do this? Like, what's your intent in this conversation and what are you committed to? For example, do you want to provoke somebody in a conversation or are you really looking for support? Are you committed to still being this person's friend, even if you disagree with what they have to say, or are you trying to unfriend them? Where would you like to be in your relationship with this colleague after this conversation? And how do you avoid using inflammatory or accusatory language? All of these questions should be asked before you decide to engage with someone on a tough topic. This is especially important because canceling friends or unfriending somebody in the workplace can definitely have some complicated additional issues associated with it. But that's not a good enough reason to not make friends in the workplace because the benefits of having friends in the workplace far outweigh the risks of those friendships ending if you can navigate conflict appropriately. So, regardless of how or even whether you engage with others, just remember that you don't know where everybody is coming from. Others may have different beliefs or value systems than you. They may be coming from a different place and have different experiences. They may or may not have the conversational skills that you want, but they still, as a general rule, especially if they're a genuine friend of yours, want to provide you with support and you want to provide them with support. So, when you're having difficult conversations with people, stick to areas of shared interest or compromise. Remember that you don't need every friend to be part of every aspect of your life and every value of yours needs to be shared. And remind yourself that this is especially true at work, where you've got a rare chance to engage with people that might be really, truly, genuinely different from you. But in order to accomplish that, you've got to approach that with an open mind, an open heart, and lots of empathy. Listening ultimately is valuable for its own sake, and workplace friendships, that is doubly true. Until next time, I've been Gabe Zichermann. I love to give speeches and workshops. I've helped lots of organizations build a better culture using behavioral science, and in particular, I'm very engaged around this topic of front forward. organizational design. Be sure to subscribe to Friends, Fun, and the Future of Work, and we'll see you in the next episode.